Over the years, I've done single family was first. I built up a pretty big portfolio there, and I started buying commercial real estate. And then randomly after '08 and losing it all and starting over again, in 2011 is when mobile home parks kind of came on my radar just randomly. And I went and bought one with a little bit of cash I had scrunged away that the banks didn't garnish out of my accounts. Turned that thing around, started making money, and here we are, fast forward to today.
How do you underwrite this stuff? You're not betting that the Fed's going to save you or make you. How do you keep your head? How do you look at it and say, this is a good deal?
We look at everything with a 10 plus year horizon. It's the only thing that can ever crush that deal, right?
Kevin, what's going on, man?
AJ, life is good, my friend. How you doing?
Doing good. We were just kind of mentioning here for a second before we got on that we're both, this year's been busy in a good way.
Yeah.
Obviously, in times like this, there's a lot of distress, there's a lot of issues, but there are lots of opportunities. And, at our firm, we have obviously the bad, but then we also have the good in new acquisitions. So right now, what are you guys seeing, man? You're out there, you're focusing on a few different asset classes, but you are finding opportunities.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's been 2023 and 2024 were actually two of our biggest years ever as far as like new acquisitions. And 2025 has been great as well, and we should wrap this year up with a bang. And so, to your point, we're in two different verticals. Mobile home parks is one, and then parking. So think about parking garages, parking lots. Those are the two assets that we acquire. And so, a lot of folks have seen the distress in the multifamily space. That necessarily hasn't taken place in mobile home parks. There wasn't a lot of the exotic debt in the mobile home park sector, a lot of the bridge debt that you saw in the multifamily space. And so, for that reason, there's just not as much distress. And also there's not as much supply out there in the marketplace. So, mobile home parks have been able to just kind of trend with inflation as far as like rent increase and things like that, basis. Whereas multifamily had like this oversupply, people were having to do concessions and like you're having to do rent decreases, right? And so
that was same with storage, right? Storage got hit with that same thing, oversupplied, overzealous. That's like for us, so like you got started on your upside and finding opportunity a lot earlier than we did. It really took to the end of 2024 and then this year till we could really start to see opportunity.
And I think, where I was going with that is like, at least in the mobile home park stuff that we've acquired is that obviously transactional volume dropped significantly 2023 and 2024. So not as many deals would come to the marketplace. But what we saw is that anything that did come to the market, anyone that was ready to sell in those last couple of years probably had a motivation to do so. It might not have been a debt maturity, but just a time of their life. And so while we weren't buying, distressed situations, what we found is that a lot of our would have been competition those prior years were on the sidelines. They weren't in a position to buy.
Yes.
And so, we were able to be hyper competitive and actually take down the assets that we really, really wanted. Not that we were buying distressed assets, more, not even distressed situations, just not as much competition, not having, 10 other bidders on the same property. Now we've got to, work our way to highest and best and probably end up overpaying because someone's always willing to pay a little bit more than you is what I've found over the years, right?
Especially when interest rates are low.
That's right. That's right. And so like, that's kind of how it played out for us. And like, again, we were, and I think if you kind of walk it back then to the couple prior years when interest rates were at all time lows, when there was just a chaotic buying frenzy that was taking place, we did buy during those years, but we didn't buy a lot. In fact, we actually became a lot more net sellers and kind of pruned out the portfolio. And we would buy when it made sense, but we had a hard time being competitive because there was always someone you were willing to pay a little bit more. And so that I guess that discipline, I don't want to act as though like I knew what was going to happen. I knew how this was all going to play out, but like just us being disciplined, I think stewards of capital at that point in time for our investors put us in the driver's seat, over the last couple of years when others couldn't buy.
Yeah.
They wanted to buy, maybe they couldn't buy, right? They're kind of dealing with the chaos and the fallout inside their own portfolio. And so that's kind of where we're at in the mobile home park space. So we've taken down some great assets, some institutional stuff over the last couple of years that we probably wouldn't have been the buyers on. I mean, not that we wouldn't have wanted it, but we wouldn't have been the ones that have probably been awarded because we're never the highest payers. We've got a great reputation. We transact, we get deals done. We don't go mess around retrading, but we're never the highest bidders on a higher grade property. But But anyway, like it's worked out really well. Everything happens for a reason. The timing's worked in our favor. And again, I think it's just kind of goes back to like everyone knows that real estate's it's a long game, right? And so
long game.
I've been doing this for 20 years, and so like I just know like you get a couple pops if you do it long enough. You get a couple of those home runs every once in a while, right? But most of them are singles and doubles, which is fine. And I think you just have that have that mentality going in here, and that's what we've had for the many years that we've been running Sunrise Capital, and so it's been a fun ride. And so
we're right there with you. The deals that especially in 22 and 21 that we purchased were so disproportionate to the rest of the portfolio that we could not only just keep going even when we didn't buy any deals like that next year, but we had cash and we could start buying when things changed. And it's, when we look at those different cycles, because I went through 2008 and the same thing happened to us then. We had deals, but the deals that we had, they were like, we could go with them. We didn't have any problems with them through 2008. Luckily, we were not highest payers. And then after that, we were set up in a spot where there was just no buyers. And so all of a sudden we could be very choosy and we could pick it. And I want to say, I think a lot of people hear that and they think that, and they're like, oh yeah, well, if I was in 2008, but I got to really preface this because as I know, and everybody else that went through it, it's not like things were just on a discount. And what I mean by that is the values that had crashed for a reason.
Yeah.
So when we bought them, the values were down, but it's not like we bought them and are like, oh, this isn't a crazy screaming deal. No. At the time, we're like, ugh. Because the values were down for a reason. Now, hindsight, everything we touched just looked like obviously gold. But it was kind of a scary time. And so when I look at even like you've been buying the last 3 years, that shows that experience and discipline moving in a place where you don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. You don't know what's going to go on. But to be able to look at a deal and say, listen, this is a good deal. Fundamentals, right?
That's right.
I can't tell if it's screaming hindsight or we'll see if it was just a rock star or if it was just a great deal, but it's a good deal. And so then you could move in and buy. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that position where they freeze and they're not in a position to where they can buy. But even if they could, they don't know how to underwrite it. They don't know how to see it when you're not just adjusting for cap rates go down and values just go up. Then how do you, that's a totally different type of underwriting. Like, I like to say the market doesn't make us, right? So you don't underwrite for the market to save you, to make you. Like,
that's right.
A good deal is a good deal. And we buy it when it's a good deal. And so how do you view that? And you're talking about in a world of interest rate, the Fed just came back and said interest rates go down, but take all of that out. You're not betting that the Fed's going to save you or make you, especially when you didn't even know when that was going to happen. How do you underwrite this stuff? How do you keep your head? How do you look at it and say, this is a good deal?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of that does come down to just like time in the business, time in the industry, and a number of deals that you've looked at, right? I mean, it's just there's no replacement for that. And I've been at this now, in the mobile home park space. We bought our first park back in 2012, so 13 years in that sector, and then prior to that, I've owned hundreds of apartment units, hundreds of single family. I've owned a bunch of commercial real estate, so I've seen quite a bit. I've underwritten a lot of properties. I've kind of seen the business cycle of various property types and how they interact with where we're at in the particular market cycle. And so again, there's no replacement for the actual time and experience that I have behind helm, right? And so, but with that being said, when we look at a deal, we run sensitivity analysis on it. I want to know the market intimately. I think the one thing that you can't replace as well is intimate market knowledge, right? You can look at all the data points, you can look at the demographics, and you can try to draw some type of conclusion as to how this thing's going to perform, and there's a lot of value there. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like we use various resources, but man, it sure as hell doesn't completely make up for actually having intimate market knowledge. Like literally, what side of the street, what side of the neighborhood, where's the good school districts, where's the bad ones, where what's the feedback from the population there, like where do they want to live, where are they moving away from, and some of those demographics and those data sources, like they're delayed. They don't necessarily have all those key points that you need to make an informed decision. So I think just we're, and while we do buy in some new markets, I would say that most of our time is spent in very geographically targeted areas that we know like the back of our hand, that we've been investing in for many, many years. And so, if you have all that broader knowledge, I think when you really get down to brass tacks of underwriting a deal, again, to your point, the fundamentals really haven't changed. Like you can make a pro forma say anything. The one thing I can promise you is that whatever that pro forma says, one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to exceed expectations or it's going to miss expectations, right? It's going to miss.
But it won't be whatever's in that pro forma.
It's never going to be. And so, I mean, we're very disciplined about being conservative on our underwriting model. Even when we feel really strongly for a deal, we'll be very conservative about the exit cap rate that we're underwriting to, whether it's 5 or 10 years. We'll be considerate to recapturing the loss to lease over what period of time. Do we rip the Band-Aid off? Like what ultimately occurs when that happens? Like, does everyone keep paying? Do we have some type of attrition rate associated with that? And so let's take a more linear approach and let's draw it out over 5 years and just try to find the balance point that we feel very comfortable with. But again, that comfortability is built around like many years of doing this. And I don't know how to necessarily replace that, right? And so we try to figure out what the worst case scenario is, what the best case scenario is, and then try to find a comfortable middle ground. And we've got a full best now at this point in the stage of the game. We've got a lot of folks on our team that are way smarter, even myself, that bring decades of experience. So we have a full blown like investment committee to where I feel very comfortable. I've made most of the decisions for things that we bought over the last decade plus, and it's myself and one other principal, and we both have had a ton of experience. We have trust in each other making the right decisions, but it makes it even a little easier when you've got some additional third party perspectives on our team that are providing their insight, their influence, their feedback, and helping us make a more collective decision as an organization. So I don't know if I have an exact answer to your question, but that's how we typically approach it.
At the end of the day, you have fundamentals, experience, and team.
There you go.
And I think when you look at those three legs of that stool, it is that is really it. And even when you look at experience, like there's some things that I can go get if I don't have. So I can go get experience through partnerships or hires, right? That can bring things to the table and realize that, like you said, I'm not the smartest person. To have a committee of people looking at this, to look at it from all other angles, bringing those expertise and experience to the table. And then you build off of fundamentals.
That's right.
And you mentioned another thing that was important, time. When you look at some of our deals, even some that we're selling now that, we're talking multiples of returns, you're going, we look at it and go, oh, you bought it for X and sold it for X, and you just think that that's it. I'm like, no, this was a 15-year period of time. Yeah, magic. It went like this, and you go through those ups and downs, and you realize, right, markets in the short term are wildly erratic. And in the long term, they are fairly good weighing machines to value, but we don't get to time that. We have no control over that time between the, cost of money, between demand, right? All that stuff. So when you stick to those fundamentals, you protect yourself, and then you let the long term, that weighing machine, come to your advantage.
That's right.
So then you can take advantage of it on the sell side and on the buy side then when it comes up. But it is a long-term game.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Warren Buffett. I mean, he talks about buying great businesses at fair prices, and not necessarily having to steal them, but like let time do its thing, right? Like, again, this is not a short-term game. And don't believe me, just like you, I'm sure we've had some great pops, right? You bought a couple of those deals, you just bought them at such a low basis, like you crush it in a couple of years. And that's great, and that will happen. But really, it's when we look at stuff, and we might be slightly different than even a lot of other syndicators, where we look at everything with a 10 plus year horizon. And that doesn't mean that we haven't sold. It doesn't mean we haven't sold in year 3 or 4. I'd say most of everything that we have historically sold, we've owned it for 5+ years. And so when we go into stuff, we look at it as a much longer term hold. We're much more conservative of how aggressive we have to be with rent increases. How we're honest with ourselves about expense loads and how inflation is going to impact that over the whole time frame. But going in, we always put fixed rate debt on. That's so we don't shy away from that. Typically, most of the debt we put on non-recourse. We do have some recourse debt here and there, but for the most of the time, it's non-recourse. And then up until recently, up until the rates started going up, most of all the debt we would put on would be 10-year fixed debt, typically over 25 or 30 year amortization. We've adjusted that on the last couple of years, only because I feel as though at some point in the next 5 years, rates will trend downwards. And so while we're still putting fixed rate debt on, it's all anything that we've done in the last like 2.5 years has been 5-year fixed rate debt, because I do believe there will be an opportunity to recap it here in the next couple of years and put some better debt in place that then will fix for, the 10-year span of time.
Yeah, I don't want prepayment penalties today. Today's not a time where I want prepayment penalties. We're the same way. We do, when we can. We have certain exceptions, whether that's we're doing expansions or even maybe a new build where, 10 years not available, but for the rest of it, it's 10 years out. And that is something we saw, 2008 and recently hit hard, where you have floating rate debt because it was cheaper at the time. And we forget how fast that can change.
That's right.
How quickly that can change. And by the time it already changes and starts to change, you can't do anything about it. You can't then go back in time and lock in, right? And that changes everything moving forward. So that long-term view gives you then, as the investor and the operator, the ability to not let the markets take advantage of you, but you take advantage of the market, both on the structure side of your number one risk and liability, which is debt, but then also on your value-based buying.
Yeah.
And I obviously subscribe to this type of investment thesis and theory. It's a big deal.
There's only one thing that can really kill it. If you buy a good deal in a good market and you operate it as you should. So making all those assumptions, right? Like you bought it right. You bought it at a fair basis. You didn't steal it. You're a good operator, or you're doing a good job of asset managing it, and you're following the business plan as you laid out. And it was a good business plan. So making that assumption, really, the debt's the only thing. The debt's the only thing that can ever crush that deal, right? And it's either because you picked a floating rate option and rates shot up, you didn't forecast that. You've got a short-term debt maturity, and you didn't align it with the business plan, and time ran out for XYZ reasons, or you over leveraged it, or it could have been a combination of the three. But it all ties into not doing an appropriate job placing the right capital stack in place. And again, I think that's really what has played out in the multifamily sector, unfortunately, because there's even some really good sponsors out there that are finding themselves in a precarious state with some deals. And it was all, the deals are good. They're still in great markets, but they're falling apart because of the capital stack they put in place. And a lot of them were over leveraged. They were doing, ridiculous LTVs on these floating bridge, 2 and 3 year bridge loans, and having to pay for these ridiculous rate caps. I mean, like it was a very, very complex, tricky capital stack that if anything went awry, now we're seeing what happened. Stuff falls apart.
Yeah. It's hard to underestimate this because you mentioned it perfectly. If anything goes awry, and if you look as an example in the self-storage world, things took place, especially over the last 3 years, that we didn't even know. Even after going through 2008, we couldn't even imagine what would have happened. We saw rates drop by 60% in some markets, and yet occupancy was at 90%. Wow. That's not only never happened. In 2008, we had occupancy drop to 70%, 65%, and rates only went down like 10% on street rates. That has to do with dynamic pricing and how we end up pricing assets, everything else. But the point being is, you could have never forecast that. So if you have a situation where one thing can go wrong, more or less all the things can go wrong, which you don't know. Yeah. So when you look at that, you have to be prepared for things to not go perfectly.
And something will go wrong.
Exactly. I'm like, I have to have my margin of stupidity. And the reason being is because I don't know everything. And I'm like, I can't predict things I don't know. So there has to be a margin there of, we understand where our liabilities are at. We understand, and we have flexibility over time to maneuver and change that allows us, when things go wrong, to first have options, and also then to be able to have time to deal with it. The problem when that changing rates and those complicated stacks like you're talking about, it doesn't give you time. So I view them as, triggers. So I look at it and I go, you have a trigger where the value is triggered at that time, whether you want it to be or not. So if the market determines the value's lower, even if nothing else has changed, you have a value trigger on your debt that could wipe you out. Yeah. And when you talk about extending out that debt, all you're doing is you're getting rid of a trigger. So then you have the option where cap rates go up or down, you're cash flowing, it doesn't matter, right? You're like, I don't care if cap rates went from a 5 to an 8. We're cash flowing, we're fine. And we have no trigger events coming that would put us in a spot where we have to do it. That protects you to be able to weather those storms, those complicated capital stacks, and the complexity of everything needing to go one way or go right is like leverage on those small incremental changes in the marketplace that can really get you.
Yeah, I think to maybe summarize that is just make sure that time's on your side. I mean, that's it.
Yes.
Like you make decisions around having some additional time than what you think it's going to take, because everything's going to take you longer. Everything's going to be more difficult. Like business plan's not going to go as you've laid it out in your pro forma. There's going to be variances there, some to your favor and some not. So just give yourself some extra time.
So what have you struggled with? When you're looking at all your properties, where are you seeing the pain in your guys' portfolios and your markets? Like where do you see the pain or the struggle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if I'd even label this pain. I'd probably put it this way, what our organization looked like and call it 2020, meaning like size, team, infrastructure, SOPs in place, and just we look very different, night and day different today. Even the amount of talent that we brought on the team, even on a leadership level, right? Leadership level 5 years ago was myself and my business partner, right? And we kind of wore not all the hats per se, because we would always have, we had a director of ops and we had someone that kind of led the finance team, but not necessarily at a leadership level, someone that could own it better than what either he or I could. And so we've along with that comes growing pains, and we didn't build out all that team while we were staying stagnant as far as like the size of of our holdings, right? And so it was simultaneous, right? You build the plane as you fly it, and so really a lot of the pain over the years has been buying property, putting ourselves out there, buying great opportunities, but knowing that like, man, this is going to shake up our current infrastructure. It's going to put some cracks into the system, and we're going to have to build it as we fly it. And that's difficult to do, because like you're literally trying to put some tape over here, put some tape over there. I need some glue, like you're putting out all these random fires, knowing that like, you got the end in mind. The end's a beautiful thing, but it's not just a matter of months to get there. It's going to take years to get there. And so really the last 3 years have been critical growth years, but also a lot of work really putting, what we feel is a better solid foundation in place that will allow us to now, we could grow 3x without having to go through necessarily the same growth pains that we just went to over the last 3 to 5 years. So a lot of the pain has been a result of that. And I'd say the pain would be, maybe being a little bit more delayed than what we'd want on like quarterly reports to our investors. Like we used to outsource all of our accounting. We had a great firm for a number of years, and they decided to go a different direction. From real estate, they wanted to specialize in like dental practice, and we worked them for years. They were phenomenal. They kind of acted as our fractional CFO as well. We had a great relationship. When we left there, I think that was in 2021, and we moved over to, I'm not going to name names, over to one of the top 5 firms. It was supposed to be great. We're spending 3 times the amount of money. It was a horrific exchange. It took a year and a half. We fumbled around, never got things right, realized that like this is not going to work. And then moved over to one of the other top 5 accounting firms who we have been with now for the last 2 years. And even then realized that we're paying a ton of money. Everything's still delayed. Like we have no accountability. Like we're just, passing on this bad news to our investors and we have no control over it. And like, they've got the manpower, but we're just not being allocated it, right? Like we're not important. Yes. We're one of 1,000 or 10,000 clients that they have. And so like we just brought, we brought financing. We just brought a CFO in-house, a controller in-house, and we've truly bring out our entire accounting team right now as we roll. And so anyway, it's just, those are the pain points that we've had is trying to build it as we fly it. And we're not done yet. I mean, surely we could always be doing everything better within the organization, but it's a night and day from what it looked like 5 years ago. So
us too, same boat. We've been restructuring, new talent up at the top, our financing structure, accounting. Right. Like I'm right there with you. The last 3 years, we have seen so much change within our organization. And that is, while you're growing and everything else, that it's change is change, right? There's struggle with it. You're learning. We had to change accounting firms also, which that was horrific. Same experience. And, Man, do I feel that. That's like last 3 years, me too, right there with you.
Yeah, no, but it all comes along with the territory, right? I mean, like this is what we signed up for.
How did you get started in it though? I mean, like you mentioned growing a business. Why did you want to do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you really want to hear the backstory, I mean, it goes back a couple decades. So I'm 46. I always forget my age. I'm 46 right now. And I bought the first. I got introduced to real estate at 19, and then I bought the first property at 20. It was a single family home. But I mean, just backing up, I'll try to be brief with this. I mean, I was never all that academically driven in high school. Neither one of my parents went to college. Grandparents didn't go to college, and both my parents were 9-to-5ers. Working W-2 jobs. My mom was like data entry. Making probably slightly above minimum wage. My dad was a electronic technician, and so making probably middle tier, income. But we never went without. We didn't have a lot. We didn't, have nothing. And it was just a blue collar, good, healthy upbringing. We're in a good public school district, but never was, I was never driven to do better in school. I didn't really understand where it was going to be applicable in real life. And so at an early age, I'm like, all I really want to do is make money, because Christmas and birthdays was when the only time in my life where something new might come along. Like back then when you're a kid, it's material items like a video game or a bicycle or a dirt bike, whatever it might be. And so from an early age, I just realized that if I wanted those things, I had to figure out how to make money to do it. So that became shoveling snow, mowing grass at a really young age. This is back when it was okay to force your kids that are like 8, 9, and 10 years old to mow grass, right? And so my brother and I had chores around the house, and that chore turned into taking the lawnmower around and actually mowing other people's grass, right? Making money, shoveling snow, the same thing. Got a paper out at the age of 12, which was a huge paper out. I was so excited when I got that opportunity. And so I was always making my own way, and entrepreneur wasn't really a word. It wasn't part of even anyone's vocabulary back then. We didn't know any business owners in our family or any friends or anything like that. So what happened was when I graduated high school, I'm like, now what? All my friends were going off to college. I didn't really have a desire to do so. So I didn't have a path, AJ. I was like, I'm just going to go to community college. That's what we're supposed to do. I have no idea, again, where this is going to be applicable. And as faith would have it, at the age of 19, I was tending bar in the evening, going to school during the day. And I met a guy, through a girl I started dating. Her mother was dating this guy named David. He was a local real estate investor, man. And I just met him by hanging out at her house. And I got to know him quite well. And his lifestyle was very different than what I was used to growing up, like watching the car he drove, how he kind of carried himself, how he communicated. I mean, it was like a night and day difference. And all I knew is that he owned a number of properties. He had residents that paid him rent every month, and there was cash flow after that. And that's how he basically lived his life, is by these individuals paying down his mortgage and him living off the cash flow. And so that was just intriguing to me. And David, I got to know him for a couple months, and he invited me to a conference in Philadelphia when I was 19. I went. I quickly accepted it. I had no idea what the hell we were going to learn about, but I just knew that this guy had paid a couple $1,000 to go to this conference. He was inviting me to go. I didn't know why, although just our little interactions we'd have over at their house. And I went. This was the Ron LeGrand seminar. That guy's still out there teaching today, I think, how to fix and flip houses. But I went to this 3-day seminar, and that's what really that planted the seed, man. I came back from that super excited. But not knowing where to apply that energy. And so I made David an offer he couldn't refuse. And I essentially offered to work for him for free. I had a lot of time during the day. I had 12 credits I was taking, but I didn't work. I worked in Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So I had a lot of flexibility. And he accepted my offer. I went to work for him. I was his whatever he needed me to be. I'd go drop off supplies, pick up leases, drop off leases, return phone calls for him, place ads, put out signs, all that kind of stuff. And over a period of a year, I got to learn his business, how he did it, why he did it, how he said it, who he said it to, all those things. And I got to hear it firsthand. And that was a kickoff, man. I bought the first property with some money I saved up bartending and used one of his relationships. He turned me on as a private lender at the age of 20. And that was the first property. That's what kicked it off. And I was like, this is it. I can do this. All I got to do is follow David's plan. He seemed to do it pretty well, and it seems pretty simple, really speaking. And that's what I did. I bought the first property, and I just built upon that. And over the years, I've done, I single family was first. I built up a pretty big portfolio there, and I started buying commercial real estate, multifamily apartment complexes, and then randomly after '08 and losing it all and starting over again. In 2011 is when mobile home parks kind of came on my radar just randomly. And I went and bought one with a little bit of cash I had scrunged away that the banks didn't garnish out of my accounts, and bought that first distressed park in actually 2012. And turned that thing around, started making money, and here we are. Fast forward to today. So very condensed 20 plus year version, but that's the gist of it.
And I love that the lessons you learned, and it wasn't easy, and it was not perfect or smooth. I think a lot of people look at, guys in your position, and the context by which they see you, right, is missing a lot. And I when I see people that are successful, that have learned it, that time portion you mentioned, and also the challenges that you had to not only overcome, but the failures. So when I look at where my companies came from, everything else, I started my real estate company because I failed. Did a merger and acquisition of a company that failed and almost ruined me. It almost tanked me completely. And that's how I moved over into and started the companies that were wildly successful. And I think that a lot of times people look at it and they want that outcome, but they definitely don't want the right everything, which I agree. I don't either. So that's why I love having, you on the podcast, because your lessons that you're teaching can help people miss some of those catastrophic failures, right? That I've been through, that I know others have been through. There wasn't when I was doing it too, there wasn't podcasts. There was no books by you or anything else, like, right? We didn't have those things. We didn't have social media.
Cassette tapes.
So cassette tapes, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
And so that access of information was limited. So by other people providing it, you don't get rid of failures, because that's always going to be in. But there's different types of failures. I'm like, I really wish I would have avoided some of those failures that I went through. And I love hearing about that journey and seeing how the fundamentals that you learned from it was the foundation that built everything off. Wait, I don't know about you, but like my first property, I remember people look and they go, "Oh, you know so much about this industry." I'm like, "Do you know what my business model was when we started? It was answer the phone. Literally, it was answer the phone, make people pay their bills, and let people know that we were there. That was it. Like, it was, this is how we're going to take this property that's run down, and we're literally just going to answer the phone. You can't not pay your bills." So we'd make them pay their bills. And then we tried to let people know by a sign, or then that got into web, right? Like, oh, I'm going to make a website, things. And that was all we knew. There was no revenue management. There was no understanding of rates. I didn't know what a cap rate was. I didn't know square foot per capita, how to measure competition, right? I didn't know that. And so that's how I got started, and we got started on our first property. And we tried to build off those fundamentals.
I think it's like, it's ready, fire, aim, right? I mean, it's like, I think a lot of folks, they get, paralyzed, and they just don't make decisions. I think it needs to be perfection, and literally they just never get out of their own way. And I think that's the unique thing about most entrepreneurs. If there's, a something that's tied to their DNA, is that they're, and this is a saying that stuck with me from many years ago from a mentor, was like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Literally. Because like nothing's ever going to be right. It's not going to feel right. It's going to be awkward. Like, you're going to lose sleep. You're going to be stressed. You're going to get chills. I mean, like, it is uncomfortable. But like, the only way you find growth is by, being put in uncomfortable situations. And that's why most folks aren't built or bred to be entrepreneurs, because they want that level of comfort. They want the 9 to 5. They want a paycheck each and every week. They want stability. Whereas honestly, I see that as instability. Like, I really do. And, relying upon someone else to, cut my paycheck. I want to be fully accountable for what I do in my life, and whether I succeed or not someone else making that decision for me. But I think that's just, and we need great employees as well. So like, not everyone's necessarily cut out to be a business owner and an entrepreneur. I do think a lot of the traits can be learned. But again, it's uncomfortable. You gotta get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I could not agree with that more. Like, even when you're successful, you are taking care of problems. That's what we do. We take care of problems. When you find a good valued asset, the better the value tends to be, the more problems. It's just kind of how it works, right? Like, the other owner either didn't take care of it, they didn't update it. So there's all these things and improvements you need to fix. There's all these things that you need to do. Interest rates are high. The market's unknown. That's when you get value. You don't get value when everything's perfect and prices are soaring and money's cheap and easy. So you don't have to raise capital and all the banks will give you money. That's not how it works. So if you're not comfortable being uncomfortable, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's this is more. I'd share this story with maybe those that are listening that are maybe trying to get started or kind of like in the initial stage of that journey, and it's they're going through an uncomfortable stage, and maybe hopefully they've got a supportive network, folks that believe in them and want to see them succeed. But I think more often than not, that's not the case. You got a lot of naysayers in your life, and especially if you come from maybe a background that isn't of business owners or entrepreneurs or folks that have found, maybe parents or grandparents or friends around you that have been wildly successful. But, thinking back to my story about David, it's funny because David was about 25 years older than I, so he was the age of my parents, basically, which my friends thought it was very weird that all I wanted to do is go hang out with this David guy, right? This old guy. That's kind of creepy to like other 19-year-olds, right? Like they didn't understand it.
What are you doing?
And I'd go tend bar in the evening, and I'd be like, I'm not going to hang out with you guys tonight. I got to wake up and go put out some signs or drop off some leases or meet David at a job site. And I also didn't necessarily believe myself yet. I knew I was going to do something big, but I didn't have full belief in myself that like this time I was spending was actually going to amount to something. I wanted it to, but I hadn't proven anything yet. And you got my friends making fun of me, like just give me shit, right? That's what people do. It is what it is. And so I found myself actually kind of like keeping it secretive. I wouldn't even like share updates. I wouldn't tell anyone what I was doing. I wanted to prove it. I wanted to show them, prove them wrong and actually take some real action. And that was tough. That first year was tough, man. Like literally I spent a lot of time working with him, working for him, doing things when, my friends were out partying, having fun, doing, chasing girls. And I still had fun with the girls, but, I was more focused on like, how do I turn this into something? I feel like this is my one opportunity to actually do something big. So I got to make this work. And when I went and bought that first property, I shared it with a couple of my friends I attended bar with. Number one, I'd say like $7,000 at bartending, which to them was like amazing because most bartenders and service workers, like they literally live paycheck to paycheck or tip night to tip night, right? Like they don't save anything. And then I told them I was going to take that $7,000 and literally go buy this property in a rough part of town. Everyone knew it because it was right down the road from where I worked. And they're like, really? What the hell are you going to do with that? I think that's the worst idea. They're giving me financial advice. Don't do it. Yeah. Go spend that money somewhere else or just keep it in the savings account. And I went and did it. And against their advice, I went and did it. And only until about another like 6 months later was I able to like feel confident and prove to them like that was the right decision. I turned this property that I paid basically like $20,000 for into a property that we sold for like $50,000, right? And like it was a huge return, a huge win. But that stage leading up to that was very challenging for me internally. I'd never dealt with anything like that before. The criticism and the, basically not that they were hoping for my failure, but they almost kind of wanted to, there's always people in your life that want to see it, right? They don't want to see you succeed because they're kind of down on themselves already. They lack the self-confidence. They don't feel maybe that they've, succeeded in life up until that point.
If you fell, they were right for not trying.
Absolutely. So for anyone that's out there, if that helps anybody, I mean, like, because I feel like we all, in one form or fashion or another, we kind of go through a period of like that in our business. And it might not be in the beginning. It could be in the middle. Could be maybe you just had a rough couple of years that just went by, like that AJ and I were just talking about. Just know that like there's always going to be criticism and it's uncomfortable. It sucks. But again, back to the original point, trying to circle this around, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that, if you take one thing out of this today, I think that's a good point to take home.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think to wrap this up here, because I obviously don't want to take our time. One thing you mentioned this, what do you need to be uncomfortable with moving forward? So for everyone that has real estate, that is trying to grow or even struggling or trying to get into it, you want to be an investor, you want to build a real estate company, something like you have. What do they need to go into this knowing I need to be okay being uncomfortable with these things?
That's a great question. And I'm probably going to take the indirect answer here because here's the thing, like compared to when you got started and I got started, there's so many resources now. I mean, out there, AJ, I mean, it's like, in fact, it's an overwhelming amount. You have to spend some energy filtering out, there's a lot of bullshit out there and try to hone in on, and just dial in a reasonable amount that you want to consume, right? Because there's too much out there at this point in time. And I think surrounding yourself around guys like you or groups like like just basically someone else. There's many networks out there now, in fact, and they're regularly accessible. I mean, shit, if you want, I mean, it's the simple path, go to meetup.com. I mean, you'll probably find one or more, real estate groups in your local marketplace, or Google, if you want to be a self-storage investor, Google self-storage investing. I'm sure that there's a litany of videos and trainings, and what you have to do is you have to spend your time filtering out those that are real to those that are not. You want to find someone that's got a long-term reputation like AJ, that's been doing it for not just a year or two and had a couple of successes, but it's been doing it for a couple cycles, right? For a very long time, and has probably seen and heard just about everything, right? You've probably forgotten more than you learned. Just put yourself out there. And I think that's the uncomfortable part of this is it's all new. Surrounding yourself with a new peer group, because your old peer group's probably not real estate investors, or they're not doing what you want to do, right? And so you got to almost not unfriend your old peer network, but like you got to basically find a completely new one and intertwine yourself. And so if you're antisocial, if you find yourself that you're the quiet type, like that's uncomfortable to go find a new peer group and actually mingle, right? And talk to folks about your dreams, your wishes, your desires, and find your way into that network of folks that are already doing it, that have already achieved it. And so all that's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of folks. Even if you're not the antisocial, it's still uncomfortable to go out there and actually basically redesign your entire peer network and your surroundings, the people that you spend the time with. Because really it's, what's the proximity is power. And basically what do they say? Your net worth is equivalent to that of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Like there's so much truth to that. And so make sure that you pick those 5 people wisely and that group wisely.
The strongest thing in the world, and something I always just try to remember, it's simple: inputs equal outputs. That's it.
I love it.
What you put in is what comes out.
We say junk in, or garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. That's
don't show me that report. I mean, tell me where the actual input came from, and I'll tell you whether or not I believe this bullshit on the outside or on the output.
That's exactly right. Well, man, where can people go to find out more about you, learn about you?
Yeah. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Sunrise and what we do over there in the mobile home park and the parking space, we've got a lot of resources there as well. I host a weekly podcast. I've been doing it for like 11 years now. You can listen to all that over there. It's at investwithsunrise.com. Again, investwithsunrise.com. I've got my personal website as well, which you'll kind of find like some of the same things on. It's kevinbupp.com. But I think lastly, I'm pretty active on social. More specifically, I'd say LinkedIn. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn. And I always joke and say I've got a unique enough last name, Bupp, B-U-P-P. That if you just go type in Kevin Bupp on LinkedIn, I don't have to give you my handle. Yeah, you'll find me. I believe I'm probably the only Kevin Bupp that's in real estate in the country.
And we'll put all those links down here below so everybody has them. Hey, man, thank you for your time today. I appreciate your wisdom and learning about your experience. And as always, it's good talking to you.
Yeah, AJ, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on.